Welcome to the February 28th, 2025 episode of the Energy Show. I'm Markham Hislop, energy journalist, and I'm joined today by MP Charlie Angus of the NDP. And Charlie, welcome to the Energy Show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, look, you've been making a lot of waves. In my network, people often refer, did you see Charlie Angus's video? And I think the consensus is you're on the way out. You've said you're not going to run for re-election later this year, whenever that happens. And you're kind of telling it like it is. Is that a fair description of what you're doing?
Yes and no. I think the real factor for me is I woke up the morning after the Trump election and I realized that we were in completely uncharted waters and that people really needed to get their heads around what was coming. And I felt that the idea of just pretending and hoping and sticking with the usual talking points was completely out the window. We had to confront what we were facing. So I started to speak up. I was using my time in the House to try and lay this out, and it caught on like wildfire. It was actually a speech I gave that I didn't think was one of my better ones, but heck, whatever it takes, I'll take it. And it was really picked up in the United States of all places, which really shocked me. And I realized that there was a massive vacuum and a failure, it's maybe not a failure, an unwillingness to recognize just how dark the reality that we're facing is. So I've been speaking up. The fact that I'm not running again to me is kind of neither here nor there. People figure it's because I'm going out the door and I'm burning everything up as I go. But I'd made a decision to change direction after 21 years in political life. That's a side issue. This is the issue I'm focused on right now, which is the Trump threat.
Yeah, and speaking of Trump threats, just before we came on, started the recording, social media is just burning up with his latest comment, there was Vladimir Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, J.D. Vance, the vice president, President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and the two were trying to bully him, Zelensky, into basically surrendering to Russia. And Trump at one point said to him, "You're gambling with World War III," which is a remarkable comment for him to make. Give us your reaction to it.
I think what we witnessed is the most disgraceful political tantrum in in memory. I don't think we've ever seen anyone act as disgracefully as that. I mean, when we've seen the horrific violence that's been inflicted on Ukraine, the war crimes, the stealing of children kidnapped into Russia, and we have a convicted felon and a sexual predator who was elected by the American people. Well, that's their choice. But what we're really seeing now is he's pretty much a stooge of the Kremlin, and this abuse that he threw at President Zelensky. I think each of these moments where he bursts through a barrier, we either think, has he gone too far this time, or is this just setting us up for what will be a more frightening and darker next step? We don't know yet. I feel he really crossed over the line. I think the world can no longer ignore it. We can't tiptoe around it. We can't pretend that we can get on his good side and he'll ignore us. This is a real line in the sand, for the world, and certainly for Americans, and the failure of the American political class to deal with the obvious traitorous behavior of Trump and Trump and Vance, in blowing apart their Western allies, their Western alliances, attacking their friends. This is a moment, or will we have to see it go further? And that's what we have to be ready for.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of the American political class, because you wrote a Substack on February 25th, so just a few days ago, and you raised that as a concern. I mean, it's not just Trump; it's the media and the political class in the U.S. that has enabled him. And so I want to pursue that, but with the Canadian angle. And so I'm very fond of British historian Arnold Toynbee, and I've got a quote here that I think is very appropriate. So here we go. Civilizations, I believe, come to birth and proceed to grow by successfully responding to successive challenges. They break down and go to pieces if and when a challenge confronts them, which they fail to meet. So when civilizations begin to decline, they're met with an existential crisis, and their leadership isn't up to the task. Their political class is not up to the task. So I ask you, in fact, you're part of the Canadian political class. Is the Canadian political class up to the threat posed by not just Trump? Well, let's just start with Trump.
We are in the most dangerous time uh, in Canada's history since the 1930s. That's the frame we need to start from. Um, I don't think anybody has a game plan to get through this. And political parties are very much driven by, their strategists, their pollsters, their comms teams, and they all work in boxes and they work on what they know. So when things don't go the way they know, they try and double down. But we are now in a time, as Antonio Gramsci said, of monsters. This is not any kind of normal political realm. So I get that some of our political leaders are just hoping that we can stay in the message box and stay focused on the local things and it'll all blow over like a bad storm, but it's not going to. And I guess maybe I've been a bit like the Cassandra of Parliament, crying out saying we need a plan. And having just come back from Europe and seeing the absolute failure at NATO to confront reality, to see the fright in the Europeans and the disorientation, Canada has never been more alone. So right now, our political leaders are not where they need to be. But one thing I will say, and this is why I am hopeful in all these dark times, is ordinary Canadians are blowing my mind with their determination, their steel spine, their willingness to stand up, and their willingness, I think, to call out their political leaders is what I'm taking a lot of hope from. Ordinary Canadians get it. The political class, not so much.
This is interesting because there was a controversy over the Four Nations hockey tournament where Canadian fans were booing the U.S. national anthem, and people like Mark Carney. I'll just mention him because his explanation struck me. He said, "As long as the U.S. is threatening Canadian sovereignty, go ahead and boo." And I'm absolutely agree with that. Then over the last couple of days, there's been another controversy erupt where Wayne Gretzky is angry because Canadians are really mad at him over his apparently pro-American views. He's a regular golfing buddy with Trump. And then Bobby Orr came out 3 days ago with an op-ed defending Gretzky. And frankly, you and I are of the same vintage, and I grew up idolizing Bobby Orr. Played left defense, had war number 4. Couldn't, just I was a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm appalled, and a lot of people like me are taking to social media and venting. We're mad as hell.
Yeah, I mean, what Donald Trump's done is taken what would have been a fun game and turned it into a hate fest. We had to win that game. And I know many people who said to me, man, I wish we had a Bobby Clark to go over and break one of their ankles. Like, this is how visceral it was. And so to see Wayne Gretzky act in such a groveling manner was so far beyond what anybody in Canada could swallow. There's a level of disgust, and that it's Bobby Orr. Again, Bobby Orr, number 4, my God. I adored Bobby Orr. When Bobby Orr couldn't make that final, was it 74, when he couldn't get out to play? I mean, we were crying watching the TV when Gretzky was traded to LA. We thought that was the biggest betrayal ever. But it's not nearly as big a betrayal as what Gretzky has done in terms of showing such disrespect for Canada. So my message to Wayne Gretzky is simple. If you feel like Canadians are being mean to you, then speak up.
Well,
Otherwise, you're a traitor. Because, I mean, Donald Trump was positioning Wayne Gretzky to be a puppet, a candidate in his 51st state. Wayne Gretzky needs to stand up and say, I reject everything Donald Trump's saying about Canada. I am a proud Canadian. I haven't heard that. I just heard he's whiny. And by the way, I'm not buying any of his crappy Wayne Gretzky wine, like as if Wayne Gretzky knows anything about wine. And I'll just end on this. If I said anything bad about Wayne Gretzky 5 months ago, my political career would have been over. It's ordinary Canadians, hockey fans, who said to me, why wasn't Haley Wickenheiser, our honorary coach instead of a Vichy collaborator like Wayne.
Well, speaking of Bobby, I mean, he had an op-ed in the Toronto Sun, and he said, and I couldn't believe this. He said, "Why don't you respect Wayne's opinion? He respects yours, dude." I can't believe I have to explain this to you, Bobby Orr, but when you express an opinion publicly, you're allowed to do that. That's freedom of expression,
Mm-hmm.
freedom of speech. You're not free from criticism. We get to
Well,
respond to it and criticize you if we think it's a dumb idea, as his support for Trump is. But this is how our discourse has been dumbed down. So we've got hockey players whining to the media or their wives and complaining because we're being mean to them.
Well, again, what really inspires me is that Canadians understand this isn't about his opinion. This is about whether you believe that we have a right to exist as a country. This is about whether you believe that his golfing buddy from Mar-a-Lago has a right to take our birthright away. That's not an opinion. That's Vichy collaborationist traitor actions. So Wayne has an opportunity to set the record straight. Otherwise, we know exactly who he is. Whether his feelings are hurt or not, who cares? We're talking about our country. And what I'm really, again, these are super dark times. These are frightening times. But I just take so much hope from the people who send me messages every single day, all day long, about what they're doing, the boycotts they're leading, their determination to defend our country. Because you know what? Canadians love to squabble. There's not a nation on the earth that loves to squabble more. West versus East, got us in the North. We're mad. They don't even know we exist in the South. French versus English, you name it. But when someone tells us we don't have a right to exist, wow. That's when you see the real Canada. That's the Juno Beach Canada. That's the Vimy Ridge Canada. And that's the Canada that I am so proud of right now.
Whenever anybody, like an American, says that, we're too polite, we're too respectful, they're just going to roll over us. And I say, man, have you never been to a hockey game? Like, I mean, if you want to know about Canadian culture, and I played back in the 70s, and we were the nicest people off the rink. And as soon as you laced up your skates and got on the rink, it was like war. And that's kind of the way Canadians are. Polite, but when the chips are down, we show up.
Well, I did an American television interview, and I had to explain to them what going over the boards means. I said, it might just sound like a hockey expression. When we go over the boards, It's because they touched one of our players, and our coach taps us on the back, and your job is to go and break some teeth so that they never do that again. Canada is going over the boards because what's been put on the table, like, yesterday, them talking about redrawing our borders. No, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
No, we're not going to give up our country. And no, we're not going to walk away on Ukraine because Ukraine and Russia is Canada and the United States. We're locked together, Canada and Ukraine, for deep, deep, obvious reasons in our shared histories and our the peoples that we our deep Ukrainian Canadian culture. But this is a moment where we either stand or we break, and I don't think Canadians break.
Okay, I want to get back to the political class because what we saw when Trump threatened us with tariffs is the Team Canada approach, which is terrific. Even conservative premier like Doug Ford was on board. Two weren't, and it's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, and they very clearly were defending the oil and gas industry's interests. And, that's a major focus of our reporting here at Energy News. So we kind of follow this. And she went down to Mar-a-Lago and she tried to do little carve-out deals for oil and gas and really wasn't supportive until she faced a lot of criticism of the Team Canada approach. But then we have very close ties between those two conservative provinces and the Conservative Party of Canada and its leader, Pierre Poilievre. And is that a weakness? Should we be really worried about that?
Well, I think we were all shocked and appalled by Premier Moe and Premier Smith. And certainly I know many people have been reaching out to me from Alberta and Saskatchewan are because they were willing to throw Western agriculture down the toilet. They were willing to throw Western manufacturing down the toilet, their tech industry down the toilet to give it one more boost to the oil and gas sector. And the rest of the country saw that. And I think Albertans and people from Saskatchewan who are as patriotic and love their country as much as anybody, as much as they love to squabble with Eastern Canada, they were not having their premier look like such an obvious troll for the right wing. And I think what's happened with Pierre Poilievre, Mr. MAGA Maple, he's used the Donald Trump playbook consistently. Canada's broken. He's made our parliament unworkable. The same kind of rage and pitchfork politics. I think it's blowing up in his face right now. His numbers are dropping. I've been waiting to see them drop for some time. I think we're going to see them drop even more significantly because Canadians understand now when they see what Project 2025 looks like, that ain't going to happen here. And Pierre Poilievre is very much on the wrong side of this moment in history.
Charlie, maybe you can explain something to me. I was appalled that when Trump announced that, he threatened tariffs on 10% on oil exports, gas exports. The very first thing is the industry, Smith, their proxies, everybody began the drumbeat for more pipelines. And even we have, like Mark Carney, who looks like he's going to win the Liberal leadership, was talking about, well, maybe that's okay. Maybe we'll give another pipeline. Even my buddy Max Fawcett at the National Observer was willing to trade and use a pipeline as trade bait. Here at Energy Media, no more pipelines, no more.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the reason is there is no business case for them. Never mind that the IEA is saying peak oil demand in 2030, and then forecasts are, if you look at people like S&P Global forecasting a decline in oil sands production after 2030, there is still plenty of like 650,000 barrels a day of shipping capacity that can be added to the American market. 300,000 to the West Coast through Trans Mountain expansion can be added through optimization. There is no business case. But here's my question for you. Why do we always resort to the obvious? We default to this dumb position. We don't even talk about the numbers. We don't do any analysis. We just start parroting what the industry wants. I don't get that. So maybe, do you have any insights as to why we did that as a country?
Well, it has been said that Canada's three oligarchs in a trench coat, right? And we've seen such distortion in Canada's economic economy and society from the power of big oil. The fact that we spend $34 billion in taxpayers' money to build TMX, the fact that we're subsidizing it maybe over 50 cents on the dollar for every barrel. And then the first thing they say is, oh, if we want to keep our country together, give us what, I don't know, $100 billion to build another pipeline. It's the money grubbing nature of it. And all the way leading up to this, there was always this threat we were getting from, the right wing Western voices about, well, it's going to be an issue of national unity. It's like, what, you're gonna break the country up if the government puts retaliatory tariffs on oil and gas? Is that what you're saying? And that, we saw writers in the Edmonton Journal saying, well, maybe we'd be better off in the United States. Well, yeah, maybe you would be, but the rest of us are staying, so you can go. And I think what's really concerning here is, like, again, the vision thing. We have to do a massive retooling. We have to do a massive retooling of manufacturing, our ability to create a market in Canada, our ability to get markets in Europe, our ability to manufacture is going to take a massive amount of investment. And the first thing these guys come up with after we just built a pipeline, give us a pipeline.
Yes.
It's idiotic, but we are going to need to think of major, massive government infrastructure investment in new manufacturing to create new markets, because the United States is completely untrustworthy.
Yesterday, I had on Dr. Torsten Jackert, whose father is Mark Jackert, the very well-known Canadian economist. And what he said is the number one thing that Canadians can do is to add value to the natural resources that we export.
Absolutely.
Why in 2025 are we shipping raw bitumen to American refineries, raw logs to China, on and on and on, raw grain to wherever it is we ship it to? I'm an old Saskatchewan boy, so that sticks in my craw. But here's the thing. I know I've done a lot of work since 2017 on a program, Alberta Innovates program called Bitumen Beyond Combustion. And they are like next year, they're going to have a commercial process ready to go to turn bitumen into the precursor for carbon fiber. So if we're going to add value, why wouldn't we say, look, let's set up, we'll invest in the establishment of a carbon fiber manufacturing sector in Alberta. We'll create a domestic market for bitumen. Never mind sending it down to refineries. We'll add value here and create jobs in Canada, and then we'll ship it out to wherever they're making automobiles, because they love carbon fiber in automobiles. That's just one example, and not a single person ever brought that up as, and maybe we should do this instead of a pipeline. And then you can take all the other resources, mining and what have you, and there are comparable examples there. How do we get that on the national conversation on the board?
Well, the big problem right now, it's the ideology of the far right. I mean, there's no place on the planet that is better equipped to lead the energy revolution than Alberta. There's just no place. And, I was out there before Daniel Smith shut down the renewable sector. And the excitement and the vision and it's an energy economy, so they know how to do energy. I mean, that's what everyone
Yeah,
said. Like they said, we don't care what kind of energy, we do energy. And she
yeah.
said, no, we care. It's either going to be 20th century energy or nothing at all. As they know that they're reaching peak oil, so that's the ideology it's crushing it. We also have to take better, I think, control of our markets. I will tell you that where I live in the little town of Cobalt, Ontario, named after the metal, the Pentagon has invested in a plant that's like 3 clicks up the road from me. The Pentagon. Now, before I was thinking, oh, well, that's kind of strange. Now I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is a potentially enemy government taking control of manufacturing or of reprocessing of a critical mineral that Canadians rely on. Why are we doing this? Why are we not saying that these are our key elements? This is what, if the American, we'll negotiate, we'll sell them to the Americans, but we can also sell them to Germany. They'd take it in a second. So it's the vision thing, and that's going back to your earlier question. Our political class has not. They're tiptoeing around the huge steps that have to be taken to get us through this, to get us to be able to be again next door to a nation that may be a threat to us and will be a threat. They're not there yet.
You and I talked about Ray Funk, a former member of parliament from Saskatchewan that I know well. In fact, I worked for him a little bit for a couple of years. And one of the most profound things he ever said to me is every politician comes to office with X amount of political capital, and then they spend the rest of their political career spending that capital. And they don't have it, they're just too busy to accumulate more political capital. And he said, what's required is you need academics and journalists and community leaders and business leaders have to bring ideas to the table. Create the parade. We'll get out in front of it as politicians and we'll promote it and put in policy and do whatever it needs to be done. And I still think that, the criticism of the political class can also be extended to the corporate class, to the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are so entrenched in with the incumbents, the three oligarchs in a trench coat that you mentioned. They're so entrenched that we can't think outside the box. And I'll just before I ask you a question, I'm going to make one more point. I spend half my time as a journalist interviewing experts outside of Canada. And when I talk to people in the US or Europe or Asia, wherever it is, they're so much more advanced. We're like stuck in the 20th century. The
Yeah.
level of the quality of our conversation about energy, they're already at the forefront of what's going on in the 20th, 21st century. How do we change that? We're so mired in the past.
Well, I think that we need, again, maybe Trump is a wake up call. Maybe it's a moment for Canada. I think what we saw coming with Pierre Poilievre was this really dumbing down of slogan politics, where every MP who, if you don't want to sit on the back bench in the Conservative caucus, you repeat the same tired bumper sticker slogans, and it's created this. In politics of intimidation, politics of blame, politics of rage. I think Canadians are tired of that, and they're frightened, and they see that there needs to be a bigger issue and a bigger vision here. I would really, I maybe I'm getting just naive and hopeful after 21 years of cynical partisanship, but I want to hear someone say, "Listen, this ain't going to be easy. We're going to have to take really tough decisions, and it's not going to be done in the next 6 months. And we're not going to worry about daily polling about whether or not it's working or not. It's the retooling of our nation, the retooling of our defense, so that we can look after ourselves. It's going to take a big, big, big long-term commitment. I would like to see that being done in this parliament before we all flush it down the toilet. But again, we're all living in our political boxes right now and playing like this isn't 2023. This is 2025, and 2025 is a brand new and dark world.
Leadership, man. The leadership in Canada is letting us down, and we're not demanding enough of it. We need more people to step up and lead, and we need more support for those people who do step up. But if we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to talk about Elon Musk, because you are
Mhm. Yeah.
You are leading a petition to have his Canadian citizenship revoked. So tell us about that.
Well, I've been actually, my main focus is trying to get Elections Canada to get serious about the clear electoral threat that Elon Musk poses. We saw what in Germany they've gotten the legal power to get access to the X algorithm to see if he interfered on behalf of the extreme right. When I was in Brussels, I really learned about J.D. Vance interfering in like Romania, which would help a Putin puppet get in. And these are real clear threats to Canada. So I've been leading that fight with Elections Canada. And then a parliamentary petition came across my desk. And it's great. Parliamentary petitions, natural health products, better cutting down wait times, more nurse practitioners. Some petitions get 500, some get 1,000, some get 8,000. And it was on Elon Musk's citizenship. And I said, yeah, I mean, I know a petition can't take citizenship away, but it can send a message. And we are now on track to be in the largest petition in Canadian history. It's just taken off like wildfire. And it's sending a message. It's sending a message to Parliament that we don't want any deals with Elon Musk. We recognize him as a threat. And it's also sent a message to Mr. Muscolini himself, because he did, right after all this came out, he posted, he said, well, Canada's not a real country anyways. Okay, dude, give us back our passport then and go back to South Africa.
Yeah, go sell your Tesla someplace else because
go sell the douche panzer. I don't think you got much of a market for it anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. Where can viewers find that petition if they want to sign it?
You just type in Google Elon Musk petition, you'll get that. And the other petition that I'm trying to get is the Pledge for Canada, get people to sign. We've got everyone from former Prime Minister Kim Campbell to Danny Williams to Arcade Fire to Pam Palmatier to labor leaders to academics. So the Pledge for Canada, you type that in, Pledge for Canada, and sign that. We're trying to get that. Get to the 100,000 mark. But the Elon Musk petition, yeah, just type in and sign on and get your family, make it a family event, because we all hate Elon Musk.
Well, isn't that the truth? Thank you very much for this. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. And I hope to have you back on the show and to talk about this issue of leadership, because this is, and especially after the Liberal leadership race, the election's coming up, I think it's on the 8th, and then we'll have a new prime minister. And then the issue of leadership is going to be front and center. And
Yep.
clearly we need a national discussion about this. And as an independent media, I'm a little biased, but this is our 17th year in operation. We've been around for a while.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And there's been a big shift in the mainstream media, clearly towards, what the ownership, because they're all owned by American hedge funds and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they want. And we have to find a way to rise above that, provide the leadership, and rally Canadians around that leadership. So I look forward to future conversations.
I would love to get back on and talk about that.
Sounds good. We'll look forward to it. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.